Hello everybody and welcome along to another brand new quick little video today where we're just several hours away from Spyfall Part 2. So I wanted to give you guys a quick preview of what I think is going to happen in Spyfall Part 2 and any sort of information we can find out by this episode, because there really isn't hardly any. So yes, we were left on quite the cliffhanger at the end of Part 1 back on Wednesday when we saw, well, the Master being revealed. We saw the three companions in a plane that's about to fly and crash into the Earth, and the Doctor in some nowhere land that we don't know what it is at all, and it's all a bit of a disaster, and these mysterious white creatures as well, whatever they may be. So we're left with a lot of questions. I feel like this story in particular has opened so many questions and not really given us any answers to any of these questions yet. The whole line from the Master about everything you think you know is a lie, what these white creatures are, what the whole actual plot and idea and the Master's plan is, like, we really don't know anything, which is really quite exciting, I think, and also just gives the opportunity to really theorise about what might happen in this episode. So what do we know about Part 2 of Spyfall? We know that it's written by Chris Chibnall. We know it's directed by Lee Haven-Jones, somebody who not the director of episode 1, but a different director of this episode, which gives sort of maybe a slightly different look potentially to the story. We know that it's predominantly, at least, or at least that's what it's been promoted as being set in Paris in 1943, which obviously is a bit confusing given we spent the whole of this episode in the present day across the world and suddenly we're going to the middle of World War II in Paris. But that is supposedly what a lot of this story is set in. It features somebody called Noor Inayat Khan, who was a sort of a British Indian spy, basically, and codebreaker type person in World War II. And she's going to somehow be a part of this story. Don't quite know how, but as far as we know, she's going to be involved in the plot of this story in some way, which will be quite interesting to see, I think. And maybe a few other sort of historical people of the time that not necessarily are well known, but are going to kind of be involved in the story in some form, we believe. We also know that Barton's back in this episode. Daniel Barton, he's returning. Lenny Henry's character is going to be at least somewhat involved. We saw that in the Next Time trailer. But apart from that, there really is very, very little we know about this episode, because then there hasn't, for once, for a rare occasion at least, that I haven't seen, there has not been any previews of the episode from any of the sort of news outlets. So places like the Radio Times or Den of Geek or newspapers like The Independent or The Guardian usually get a preview copy of the episode before it airs so they can watch it and then kind of give a spoiler-free, here's a few thoughts about the episode. They did that for episode 1, mainly because there was a screening of it before Christmas, but for this episode there's been not a single thing. So I don't know anything about sort of what this episode is going to be like. There's been no kind of critical opinion, shall we say, of this story, or hints at what it's going to be about, or whether it's any good or not, because there's simply been nothing. So it's quite a rare occasion, because I always like to read those if they come about, and I would have liked to have read something about Spyfall Part 2, really. But the fact is, I know nothing. They've given us nothing, so it means I've got completely sort of, well, very high expectations, but also not any perception of what it might, whether it's going to be good or not, really. We've just literally got to wait and see, I think. As I say, there's lots of questions to be answered. One of the key questions is probably that line from the Master of saying everything you think you know is a lie. Christian was asked about this question, I think maybe at the screening of episode 1, and he said that there is an explanation to do with this, and you've got to wait and see in Part 2 as to what happens with that. So the implication is we're going to get some sort of explanation about this in Part 2. I know there's been for a while rumours going around about a complete changing of the lore of who the Doctor as a character is, or their early years, that they initially were some sort of young girl called Ruth, I think it was, who wasn't actually a Time Lord but kind of had some special powers, and then came and basically created Gallifreyan Time Society and the whole time travel and regeneration and all those kind of things. She created that before becoming the Doctor. It sounds bonkers and wacky and the sort of thing you probably would have got in the sort of mid-90s New Adventures, Virgin New Adventures type story, or even maybe it's too crazy for that. But that was a rumour that was going around kind of alongside the Sacha Dhawan Master rumour, which turned out to be true, hence why I'm kind of giving it slightly more credence than maybe I would have done before this point. To some extent, I'm kind of I don't think it's that likely we're going to get a deep explanation for what that sort of line means in episode 2, because we've still got 8 episodes of this series left. And I would put a lot of money on, assuming the Master doesn't get killed off in tonight's episode, which is never going to happen, then I put a lot of money on him turning up at some point later in the series, probably in the big 2-part finale. So yes, I'm going to be very, very intrigued to see whether we find anything else about that and what it is that everything is a lie. What is everything? What is the lie? I'd be fascinated to find out. There's obviously also all this stuff about the these white creatures, what they really are. I know some of the people are saying, oh, it looks like a Vord. Could it be a Vord from the Keys of Marinus in 1964? Could they be Cybermen? Could they be Vord that turn into Cybermen, like a Doctor Who comic that was written, I think, called The World Shapers or something, where essentially it's Vord who develop into Cybermen. Which, well, it sounds a bit bonkers and unlikely, but you never know, I guess, with Doctor Who. Given that they brought the Master back completely unexpectedly in episode 1, I kind of feel like it's more possible that we could have bizarre and wacky things happening in episode 2 than maybe I would have said for series 11. So you never know, we'll have to wait and see, but I'm certainly intrigued to find out what these creatures are, what their involvement with the Master is, and sort of what their whole Master plan is. I know they talked about taking over the universe or something, which implies they're sort of creatures from another universe wanting to take over all these different types of universes. I'll be interested to see whether we get any exploration of this whole, or this hint at this kind of alternative universes type of idea, given the map showing all these different worlds, when we saw where all the alien spies were placed in different versions of Earth that suddenly split into, implies maybe a sort of a multiverse of different worlds and universes and things like that. Is that something, an idea that's going to be explored in this story? I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to find out, I think, though. Of course, we've got to resolve the parts of the actual cliffhanger itself of what's going to happen to Graham, Ryan and Yaz. Let's be realistic, they're not going to die in episode 2, so I'm sure they'll find a way out, but quite how, I don't know. And also where the Doctor is. That's kind of the big interesting question for me, is what is this mysterious place that the Doctor has ended up in, that Yaz went in and came back out of? Has Yaz been affected by being in whatever this place is? And the Doctor clearly knows what it is, given the way she reacted. I'm sure she does, but what is this place? Is it sort of somewhere, I don't know, I'd like to think maybe those strands are, each of those strands, are they kind of ways to access an alternative universe in some way similar to what we saw in the Pyramid at the End of the World with the monks and their sort of weird tentacly things they pulled on to go into sort of controlling the Earth and things like that. Could it be something along those lines? I don't know, I'm just guessing here, guys. I'm really just guessing, but I'm certainly excited to find out. It feels, particularly with this story, there's just so many questions to be answered. I'm sure, unfortunately, not all of them will be answered fully in this episode, but hopefully over time, lots of these questions will be answered by the end of the series, and just set up lots of really exciting ideas and sort of plot points. And the other main thing that I'm excited for, and I'm sure all of you guys are excited for, is to see what is the Sacha Dhawan Master going to be like. Because we've only really seen a couple of minutes of him actually playing the character of the Master, but now we've got a whole episode to enjoy of the Sacha Dhawan Master. Well, we certainly hope that he'll be in also this episode to find out how he's going to portray the character. The implication, I think, reading sort of, despite what we kind of saw at the end of the previous episode, where he seemed to be a bit crazy, maniacal, a bit John Sim-like in his portrayal of the Master, sort of reading lots of quotes from him about what he's thinking of playing it, sounds like he might be trying to rein it back in and try and kind of find a deeper sort of meaning to the character than just being a maniacal genius type person. He's a bit crazy and unhinged and just does stuff and he's a bit evil. I feel like he's going to try and find, he's implied he's going to try and find more in his character than that. So I'd be interested to see a sort of a slightly different portrayal to it, rather than it just being yet another kind of Sim Master copy. That I prefer, not that I just like that character massively, but I think it'd be nice to have a more maybe classic type Master, more Roger Delgado or Anthony Ainley, in terms of being a bit more suave villain than just maniacal genius type person that we've got more recently. So, well, we'll have to wait and see on that, but that's certainly one of the things I'm most excited about for Spyfall Part 2. So yes, that just about rounds things up for my quick little preview of Part 2, because we just don't really know very much about it, that I can't really tell you. I can tell you that it is an hour long, it's another 60-minute episode, so that's certainly going to give a little bit of extra runtime to try and unravel all of this. It's of course the first time we've ever seen a Chris Chibnall two-parter. Well, we did see a Silurian two-parter in Series 5, but as a showrunner this is his first proper two-parter. So the key question is going to be how he can kind of continues on the story and ultimately resolves a lot of the story in this Part 2, and what plot points therefore carry on to the rest of the series and aren't resolved in this episode is going to be really interesting things to find out. And of course I should say, if we're going to find out where the Master is in his timeline, whether it is after Missy or if it's an earlier one, who knows, we're going to have to wait and see and find out though, I think. But before I go, I just wanted to read a rather entertaining comment, because I asked earlier today in my YouTube community post about what people's predictions were for Spyfall Part 2, and one entertaining one that I absolutely want to happen, and I'm going to be so disappointed if it doesn't happen. It comes from Oricorio YT, I guess yes, that's for YouTube, who says, I believe that Ryan is going to obtain wings and will save Graham and Yaz and take them to Barry Island of Gavin and Stacey. They then find a Shoe Zone shop, and it's revealed that Shoe Zone is the main villain of Series 12. Who would have thought it? The fam then fight Shoe Zone, defeat it, and save the Doctor from that place, and that's how the entire series ends. So I don't think that Part 2 can top that. I don't think anything can top that as a plot idea. So if this doesn't happen, Chris Chibnall, I'm gonna be really disappointed. But yes, anyway guys, I hope that you've enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what you think is gonna happen in tonight's episode. I'd love to hear your theories, your thoughts, your ideas, what you're excited for about Spyfall Part 2. And well, we can enjoy it in just a few hours. So apart from that guys, remember that like button, that subscribe button if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon for another one. Goodbye.